man. We gonna go ahead and continue on with this read. Yeah. I bet. Where was I? All right. So we're gonna start from an architect, an investor, and one of our outside directors at Jet. To settle me down, Jim persuaded me to quit fretting about the day-to-day movements in our stock price and instead concentrate on building the company. That advice helped me weather many difficult trading periods in the years to come. Almost immediately, we looked to put our new investment capital to work. Our $1.5 million was a tremendous amount of money for a couple of young airline advisors, but it just wasn't going to provide equity in a whole lot of airplanes, even in 1970 dollars. We tried to leverage the initial capital with the Enterprise Fund in Boston, a 10% holder in our company from the public offering. The fund had primarily agreed to put up another $5 million in subordinated. Hold up. Let me make sure I'm getting this right. Subordinated. Okay, lower in rank or position. Subordinated debt. But the deal fell through as financial markets continued to weaken. In the end, we looked for another few months before giving up on finding another investor, and we were left worrying that Jet would become a company with a couple of leases instead of a full-fledged leasing company. Even if we could pull it off, we couldn't justify tying up all our borrowing power in just a couple of airplanes. The only way out of this dilemma, as we saw it, was to shift gears. The world had changed in the months we spent trying to leverage our $1.5 million stake. In May 1970, the Dow had sunk to its lowest level in more than 7 years. In June, the Penn Central Railroad filed for bankruptcy. Regional airlines were entering the normal busy summer travel season, not knowing if they'd survive until the fall. The transportation industry and the country at large braced for economic recession, and it no longer made sense for us to concentrate on leasing alone. In this fragile economy, there appeared to be other better opportunities for an aggressive aviation company with 1.5 with 1.5 million dollars to spend. Man, he's emphasizing that 1.5, yo. But we couldn't go out and use the money as we pleased, not with the way the use of proceeds clause was written in the jet prospectus. So we decided to try something fairly unusual. We went back to our new shareholders with a prerequisite. 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 Yeah, another term for perks. Okay. Prerequisite vote. A non-binding ratification. Hold up, man. Let me make sure I'm. Ratification. The action of signing or giving formal consent to a treaty, contract, or agreement, making it officially valid. Okay. There's a lot of things we need to ratify in that case that we hoped would allow us to consider purchasing an interest in an airline in addition to pursuing leasing opportunities. We prepared a new business plan and asked our 100 or so shareholders to reconsider their investment. They did, and more than 95% approved. So who was the 5%? With the new flexibility effectively granted by our shareholders in August 1970, we set about evaluating several troubled airline properties. We, we focused on four regional carriers: Mohawk Airlines, Ozark Airlines, Southern Airways, and Texas International Airlines. Texas International. Irony. In descending order of our interests. Each of these companies was in weak financial shape, but all had great potential and were small enough for us to consider. Giving our modest capital base, Mohawk Airlines, our primary target, was based in, how do I pronounce this? Utica. Utica. Utica, New York. Where little light. Where Utica little light. Utica little light. Okay, got like a little aerial view right here. Utica. Some quaint little chill town type ish. Alright. Upstate. No, it get cold up there. Utica, New York, with a fleet of around 25 BAC 111 aircraft. Oh, man. Now we're getting into some terms that's what it look like, brother. So this joint, y'all. BAC back 111. Okay, okay. Back 111 aircraft. It had a corner on the upstate New York market, okay, with regular service to Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, and Boston. As regional carriers went, Mohawk was one of the biggest, bigger even than the Pittsburgh based Allegheny Airlines. Am I saying that right? Allegheny. Yeah, which would later become U.S. Air, but it still had trouble making money. The company had lost more than $8 million in 1968 and 1969 and was facing a potential pilots' strike near the end of 1970. The airline needed an infusion of cash and was open to the idea of a merger or buyout. Yo, this is where the money is at, bro. Buying companies for the low and seeing profitability in it. Isn't that what Warren Buffett be doing? Despite its troubles, we liked the way the company looked. After an introduction by Robert Garrett, a Smith Barney investment banker. Barney. Barney had that investment banker, and with the support of Mohawk's Chase Manhattan bankers, we sat down with the airline's president, Russ Stevenson, and hammered out a financing agreement. The highly leveraged deal, which called for Jet to put up most of its capital, was contingent on the swift resolution of a pilot strike, which had in fact come to pass during our negotiations. We just didn't like the cash flow dips that could be expected after a long labor dispute. And a deal that looked good in November 1970 would have been far less attractive to us after a long pilot strike. As we turned the corner into 1971, however, the strike dragged on, and by then the numbers no longer made sense. The deal started to look risky to the people at Chase Manhattan as well. Jim Mitchell, Chase's senior aerospace banker, eventually persuaded us to drop out pursuit of Mohawk and let him introduce us to one of the other region's regionals on our list of troubled airlines. Aerospace banker. Hold on, I didn't even know this was a fucking thing, bro. Aerospace banker. Oh, aerospace banker. Yo, what the fucking aerospace banker refers to a professional who specializes in providing financial services and solutions within the aerospace industry. They often produce, sell, or service aircraft and spacecraft. Okay. Yo, how many of y'all knew that was a thing, man? Leave that in the comments, bro. Where was I? Troubled airlines. Mitchell, who held the debt of a number of airlines, nearly all of the small regional airlines, many in trouble, dangled the promise of a better deal if we would help coax Mohawk into considering a merger with its fiercest rival, Allegheny. The Allegheny Mohawk merger was done by early spring, but there was a sad footnote. As the deal neared a close, I began hearing reports about Bob Peach, Mohawk's founder and principal shareholder, and his distress over losing control of his company. One of the most likely reasons for his depression, geez, I suspected, was that he blamed himself for allowing Mohawk's fortunes to unravel. He was a sound, aggressive, and in some ways trailblazing businessman who had built his airline into a regional force only to see his power eroded and ultimately swallowed up by a smaller carrier, his nemesis at that. Apparently, Peach began to behave in odd, unsettling ways. His closest associates could no longer figure him out. I will never forget a February 1971 lunch meeting I had with him in a Clinton, New York restaurant, at which he displayed a very unnerving paranoia. During our lunch, he kept insisting that the people at the next table were talking about Allegheny. At Bob's pleading, and as closely as discretion would allow, I actually listened to their conversation and heard only personal small talk. They were not connected to the industry in any way, it seemed, but Bob was adamant and continued to shift about nervously during our meal. I wish I had attached more significance to his behavior at the time or knew how to get him help. A few weeks after the merger, Bob committed suicide. Jesus. Jeez, Bob. Jeez. Hughes never lost his love for airlines. 1962, while barred by the banks from running TWA, Hughes purchased control of Northeast Airlines from the Atlas Corporation, which had owned Northeast since 1938. He sold his 55% interest in the airline in 1964. In 1970, he bought the regional airline Air West and renamed it Hughes Air West. In 1980, Republic Airlines purchased Air West from Hughes. Hughes died in 19. Wait. Renamed it Hughes Air West in 1980. Republic Airlines purchased Air West from Hughes. Hughes died in 1976. A recluse. Make sure I'm just saying that. Recluse. Okay. Dang, man. Milestones, chapter 3. All right, y'all, man. We're going to go ahead and continue this another time, brother. Y'all be easy.